Hey everyone, welcome to another video on 9th edition Warhammer 40K. As always, my name is Jan. In this video, I'm excited to go over the Assault Phase as requested by you. There are a lot of changes in the Assault Phase, which I really do want to address in this video, and they're small, but they really do add up to a lot of, to a new phase, right? I do find all these little changes really do add up, and they add a lot of strategy and depth to the Assault Phase. It's going to be a bloodbath, as you're going to find out. It's going to be very quick. It's going to be a bloodbath, as I said. Now, the big thing I do want to talk about is, of course, I've talked about this in previous videos. I don't really know, but where this falls. But back in 5th edition Warhammer 40K, it was really a good balance between shooting and assault, and slowly it's been moving its way towards more shooting and 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 more shooting, and less towards assault. There are some rules in this book that kind of bring it back towards the assault, and there are some rules which kind of move it back towards shooting, so I don't really know where this falls as you're going to go over this stuff. For example, you can tie up, like in the past, if you tied up a monstrous creature or a vehicle, they couldn't shoot in the following phase. They'd have to back off unless they could fly. But in the new phase, in the shooting phase, they can just shoot you instead of assaulting. So if you assault them this turn and they survive, they can shoot you next turn if they're a monster creature or a vehicle. So that's pretty scary. But let's go over all the changes. And as I said, this is going to be some interesting points. First thing is, before we begin, is unit coherency, which I talked about in a previous video. You got to stay within unit coherency. And engagement range. Engagement range has changed now, so it's within 1 inch, as it was before, 1 inch horizontally, but 5 inches vertically. So now you can literally go under your opponent and engage them in close combat, which is a really cool tactic. I think this is for those bikes and some monsters that can fit under first levels, because monsters and bikes can go on the first level of terrain, but can't go upwards in most types, so unless they can fly. So this is a way of engaging your opponent through the layers of terrain, and that's really cool. So as I said, that's a huge change right now. 5 inch vertical engagement range, 1 inch horizontal engagement range. So now let's get to the charge phase. As you know, after the shooting phase comes the assault phase, and let's go over this in this video. So first of all, you have to declare a charge. That's just like the old edition, but in the old edition, you could declare a charge, I guess, if you were 13 inches away, if you could roll multiple 3d6, or, you know, like you could basically declare anything, I'm pretty sure. In this edition, you have to be 12 inches or less away from your opponent to declare the charge. Makes sense. So as always, you roll 2 dice. You add them together, you can move that many inches. One of the big changes of this edition is 2 things. Number 1, you got to maintain coherency. And coherency is very important. Remember my previous video about coherency. If you get caught outside of coherency at the end of the turn, you're dead. But a charging unit must be able to reach all target units of the charge. And this is a huge change as well. So on top of the engagement range, this is probably the most epic change in the assault phase. Because what the tactic used to be was, let's say the closest squad to your squad was about 4, 5, 6, 7 inches. You declare them, and then you declare the other squads around them in case you just rolled enough that you could tie them up a few squads, right? So let's say you rolled a 10, you only needed 4 inches to get to the closest squad, boom. You needed 8 inches to get to this next closest squad, you can tie them up 2. Keep in coherency, tie up 2 squads in close combat, which is awesome. In this now in 9th edition, if you can't reach the farthest squad that you declare assault with, when you roll your dice, it doesn't count as a successful charge, and you stay still, right? So let's say 4 inches is the closest squad. The next closest squad is 8 inches away, and you declare a charge against both of them. Unless you roll that 7, which because you need to be 1 inch away, you will not be a successful charge. You can't just then move up to the closest unit, like in the last edition, it counts as a failed charge. So that's huge. So now there's going to be a lot more tactic involved in declaring multiple assaults. And the other big thing is again, the more you string yourself out, the more likely you're going to end up with a broken squad, which is going to get destroyed when it has to do coherency checks, right, at the end of the morale phase. So this is a huge chance. So I don't think this is one of those things that pushes it away from assault, because assault will not be able to tie up as many squads from shooting. So there's going to be a lot more squads not being assaulted in this new edition, I feel. So that's a huge change. Huge change. Then, of course, heroic interventions. So basically, you select a character, right, that can perform a heroic intervention. Cannot perform a heroic intervention if any enemy units are in engagement range of that model. But there must be an enemy unit within 3 inches horizontally or 5 inches vertically of that character, and then you can select another character unit to perform a heroic intervention. Once all your character units have performed heroic interventions, progress to the fight phase. There's also, when you declare a charge, there's also the chance that Overwatch, of course, could happen. We'll go over that in a moment. So, actually, might as well right now. So when you declare a charge, Overwatch, again, huge change to Overwatch. Now this helps bring things back towards Assault, because now Overwatch is a stratagem. It's one command point unless you're Tau. Tau are just going to still leaf blow things off the table. They get to Overwatch as they please. And going back to my previous video on terrain, there are a lot of terrain types which will give you a bonus to either Overwatch or your Assault phase. And if you choose to get the bonus to Overwatch, you get to hit Overwatch on 5-ups instead of 6-ups, which is pretty cool. But now that it's a one command point stratagem, meaning you can only, for any army besides Tau, you can only Overwatch with 1 squad per turn. So, if you have a large amount of squads about to be assault you, you're going to notice that little Overwatch will occur, right? So this will really help people that have a lot of squads attacking at the same time, because your opponent has to be very strategic on when they're going to Overwatch, because otherwise, as only 1 squad will get shot. So that's pretty cool. I like that. So it helps nerf Overwatch, except for Tau, which are kind of annoying that way. As I mentioned, heroic intervention. So charging over terrain. You can charge over terrain pieces that are 1 inch or more. You can't charge through terrain that are taller than 1 inch in height, but you can climb up and down terrain that's more than 1 inch in height. Interesting. Flying when charging. Flying models can move over other models when they make a charge move, as they did before. Flying models can move over terrain, including buildings, like any of the models when they make a charge move. Makes sense. And as an Overwatch, so Overwatch, before charge rolls are made, all charge targets that can fire Overwatch can do so. Can never fire Overwatch while enemy units are in engagement range. Makes sense. And when firing Overwatch, shoot with units, but attacks only hit on 6s unless you can, boost your Overwatch and you hit on 5s. So now we get to the fight phase. Now the fight phase is very similar to the other one, except in a couple ways. Now a lot of people were freaking out online about the whole, literally does say on page 1 of the fight phase, starting with your opponent, alternate selecting units to fight with. However, on page 2 of the fight phase, there's a rule called charging units fight first, where it clearly just states, units that made a charge move this turn fight before all other units. So now the one thing I hope the FAQ in this case is, do heroic interventions count as a charge? Because if heroic interventions count as a charge, then whoever heroic interventioned would then get to fight first, right? So your opponent would get to choose one model that heroically intervened, if I'm reading this correctly. Then you get to charge, then you alternate between them. I think that would be an interesting rule. But again, charging units fight first, just as they did in the previous edition. But once all the units that have charged go, now your opponent gets to go first, right? When it used to be you get to go first. Now this actually has some very interesting consequences. I think it actually favors the assaulting army than the opponent. And here's my argument. If I assault you this turn, I get to go first. Charging units fight first. I get to go first. You go second. Then, when it's your turn, if you don't leave combat and you don't assault any other models into this combat, I get to go first. So I get to go first on my turn, and unless you countercharge me, I get to go first in that same combat next turn, potentially. That's pretty interesting, right? That's an interesting dynamic. So then you fight. Pile-in is you move up to 3 inches. Now, this is another big thing, is that, now you have to decide who gets to fight. The ones who get to fight only, so you decide, you choose a squad, they pile in up to 3 inches. When you get piles in, you can move each model in that unit up to 3 inches. This is a pile and move. Each model in the unit must finish its pile and move closer to the closest enemy model. A model that is already touching an enemy model cannot move, but still counts as having piled in. Remember that a unit must finish any type of movement in coherency. Once again, a focus on coherency. And once you start removing models, it gets even nastier. You make close combat attacks. Now, which models fight? This is cool. When a unit makes close combat attacks, only the models in that unit that are either within engagement range, 1 inch horizontally, 5 inch vertically, or within half an inch of another model from their own unit that is within a half an inch of an enemy unit. That's huge, right? So it used to be if my models are in coherency with yours, and then within a couple inches behind them, that's gone. It's now only half an inch. So it's basically touching bases, right? It's pretty much that. You almost have to be touching the base. Any models touching a base within half an inch of your opponent get to swing. Once again, if your opponent turtles up in a corner, this is really going to be tough because not many models will be able to get their attacks in. Number of attacks equals their wound, their attack characteristic as always. You select the targets. If the attacking unit made a charge move this turn, its models can only target units it's declared a charge against, as always. Or units that performed a heroic intervention this turn. That's cool too. That's a new one, and that's a very important rule too. So, if you heroic intervention into a squad, the old rules were that I couldn't touch you, right? Because I didn't declare a charge against you. But now I can. So if the attack unit made a charge move this turn, its models can only target units it declared a charge against, or units that performed a heroic intervention, as I said. Select targets for all attacks before any attacks are resolved. If a unit attacks multiple units, all attacks against one unit must be resolved before resolving attacks against the next unit. And then, of course, there's select weapons. Each weapon has its profile, just as before. And then consolidation moves. Now, this is the one thing, it's kind of a little weird. It doesn't really specify, but when a unit consolidates, you can move 3 inches. I'm guessing it's if your opponent is wiped off. It doesn't actually state. Oh, it does. Maybe it does. Note that all attacks you declared are always resolved against the target unit, even if, when you come to resolve an individual attack, no models in the unit remain in range. Okay. I guess that makes sense. And then consolidate. Again, you can consolidate up to 3 inches towards the closest enemy models. And that's it. That's the fight phase. But, once again, after removing models, right? So you rolled a hit, you rolled a wound. The hit is usually the weapon skill. To wound is usually comparing this, the strength against the toughness. And the big changes now in this edition are that, number one, so when you declare the charge, you have to be able to get into engagement range with all target units. Number two, Overwatch is now a stratagem, right? So your opponent can choose whether or not to Overwatch, and also the terrain may give some bonuses. Number three, you have to get an engagement range, and then it starts off with all models that charge, all units that charge go first, right? And then it goes your opponent's turn to start off with the models that didn't charge this turn. I can attack models that heroically intervened, and at the end, everything has to be done in coherency, because at the end of this turn is the morale phase, and as we went over, morale tests have changed, right? The morale tests, if you fail, you just lose one guy as a mortal wound, and then you roll for everyone else in the squad, and on a 1, they die too. And then coherency checks. That's the huge part. Unit coherency checks, because that's going to cost you a lot of your models. Once you start losing models, and if you're really spaced out, you're going to notice if you get broken up, you're going to be in big trouble, because coherency checks are going to knock off of several models. And then the following turn, of course, they can leave combat if they wish. Fly, you can't shoot anymore if you leave combat, and monster creatures and tanks and vehicles can shoot while engaged. So within that 1 inch horizontally and 5 inches vertically. And that's also one of the cool changes. So, what do you think of the Assault Phase? That's it in a nutshell. What do you think of the new rules? Please leave comments in the comment section down below what you think about the new rules. And let's create a discussion about what you think about the Assault Phase. Is it improved? Is it worse? Does it change the focus more towards the Assault Phase? Does it change the focus more still towards shooting? I'm curious about your thoughts on this topic. So as always, stay tuned for more videos on 9th edition 40K. And I can't wait to keep making them. So leave comments in the comment section down below what you want to see in future videos. I'm going to keep making some videos over the next couple weeks. Stay tuned for 9th edition. As always, this video is brought to you by my Patreon campaign. Link in the description below if you want to help support my videos. It's because of them that I keep making videos. So stay tuned for more videos on 9th edition. Talk to you, Jason.